In a wide-ranging speech, his first ever since taking office, Prime Minister Lawrence Wong laid out what he calls a major reset in policies and attitudes. Now, for more analysis on PM Wong's National Day rally speech, we have with us Associate Professor Terence Ho with us. He is from the NUS Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. Professor Ho, welcome to the program. So it is the first of many for Prime Minister Lawrence Wong. How did he do for his maiden National Day rally speech?
Yeah, so in my view, I think in terms of delivery, he managed to convey sincerity and empathy by delivering a speech that was personal and authentic. So I think in terms of delivery, he did well. In terms of policy content, of course, I think this was a meaty NDR with many notable announcements in the focus areas of families, housing, education, as well as the economy. So for instance, things like the additional shared parental leave, the revamp of the gifted education program. And there were some much anticipated details, such as the Skills Future Job Seeker Support Scheme. But for other support, I think we have to wait till budget next year for further details, such as the support for larger families. So all in, I think that both in terms of delivery, style and substance, he hit the right notes.
In terms of the style, you talk about sincerity and authenticity there. It's interesting, isn't it, to hear about his personal anecdotes, his childhood stories, and even his guitar metaphors. Yes. What do you make of all of that? Is he trying to differentiate himself from previous prime ministers by perhaps being more personable?
Yeah, I wouldn't say the previous prime ministers have not been personable. We do know something about the interests, but he's perhaps taken it a step further and sharing more about his childhood and his interests. I think that's important for Singaporeans to get to know him better, because unlike SM Lee before him, he's probably spent less time in the public eye before taking office. So this was a chance for him to really introduce himself in greater depth to the public. I think his hobbies, such as playing the guitar, riding motorbikes, as well as his very ordinary, if you like, upbringing as a boy in Marine Parade, all that helps him to be more relatable to Singaporeans as well.
And do you think he managed to give us a glimpse of the style of leadership that he is pursuing?
So I think he is not completely unknown as a leader, given that he had very high-profile roles as the co-chair of the COVID-19 Multi-Ministry Task Force and helming the Forward Singapore exercise. But he took this opportunity, I think, to underscore his commitment to serving Singaporeans and to give his all on that. And I think usually when there's a change of leader, people always want to know what the balance would be in terms of continuity and change. And so I found it interesting that you referred to what Mr. Lee Kuan Yew himself said about the need for the government to be both prudent as well as bold. And he explained that being prudent was about honoring the past and staying true to some of the the fundamentals that have made Singapore successful, while at the same time being bold in terms of innovation, in terms of being prepared to change and not letting the past constrain the future.
And speaking of these changes, lots to cheer about in his speech, isn't it? From shared parental leave to supporting lifelong learning. What is the tone that he is setting for the kind of society that he wants for Singapore?
So I think there's some themes that he's been building on, and these include inclusivity and diversity. Singapore where there are opportunities for everyone to pursue meaning on their own terms, based on their own definitions of what success is. And of course, a prerequisite to all of this would be enough financial assurance, enough support for families, and definitely support for lifelong learning, reskilling, to be able to seize these opportunities. I think he also made this point quite clear that it's not just about the policies as well, but the mindset shifts that are also needed to bring about these aspirations. So for example, if we want Singaporeans to have more children, it's not just about the financial help, but also the entire attitudes of society, which are very difficult to change. And the area of education too, we want broader definitions of success, but this will again take mindset shifts among students, their parents and teachers.
And do you think that's perhaps what Singaporeans want to see more of at this point?
Yeah, so I think the Forward Singapore exercise, of course, when you do consult and engage with many Singaporeans, there are bound to be different views. But at the same time, it was quite clear from the report that there was emerging consensus among Singaporeans, including the young Singaporeans, about wanting to see these broader definitions of success, wanting to have more diversity, more opportunities. And this was reflected in the various announcements as well from what he described as, emphasizing not just the head skills, but also the heart and hand skills, providing support for high ability students at all primary schools and not just the select 9 schools. So it's these kinds of measures that are really congruent, I think, with what Singaporeans aspire to.
So Prime Minister Wong mentioned again in his speech that policies cannot please everyone, right? This can be said of any policy in general. But how do you think he will navigate this challenge, trying to differentiate his approach to previous prime ministers, as we mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so I think it's quite a challenge today. I mean, compared with the past where maybe there are more low-hanging fruits and policies that really benefit almost everybody. So I think today's context, whatever policies are created, there will be winners and losers. I think PM Wong is acknowledging this. Of course, the government would try its best to seek win-win outcomes wherever possible, or if not, to at least mitigate the impact on those who have something to lose. But I think what's really important is that PM Wong, as the leader of the government, will have to be seen as a fair broker to manage the divergent and maybe competing interests in society and maintain that sort of trust in the government. I think what would not change is that he'll have to take some difficult decisions that won't please everyone. So being decisive, being firm, I think that would be a continuation of what has been done in the past as well. Of course, the mode of communication engagement may differ today. It's no longer possible to, bulldoze certain ideas through, but he'll probably have to still, be decisive, think of Singapore's long-term interests, and hold his ground.
You talked about maintaining trust there, and this is all part of this refreshed Singapore dream that the government has been working or moving towards, isn't it? One that Mr Wong said requires a major reset of policies amid this uncertain geopolitical environment. How do you think the next chapter of Singapore's story will look like under these initiatives that were announced last night?
So I think there's a clear direction towards greater inclusivity and assurance. So although it could seem somewhat inward-looking given all that's taking place, I think what's really important is to have a strong core, a society that is, cohesive. And this will give Singapore the wherewithal to deal with the external challenges. Yeah. And of course, we still need to think of new ways to earn a living and to pursue the economic opportunities. But what we do need is this very solid, cohesive core that will stand us in good stead.
All right, Professor Ho, thank you very much for sharing your insights. We appreciate you coming in tonight. That was Associate Professor Terence Ho from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at NUS.